So I was recording.
Yeah, hot like discussions. So.
Yeah. No, it's a completely different monster. The way it last one.
Yeah, I just 23 is today. Sam and Dad. Where you from? Okay. It's just a thing that, yeah. It's,
There's no way.
big earlier Michigan extension.
Yeah, and I never heard back from her this morning, Monica, after I emailed her again, so I don't know.
Compile on the computers. Hear from them. She couldn't get her so much money.
Yeah.
The meeting. Waiting. At 5:30. Where are you? Okay. Brett thought it was at 6 o'clock. He's coming up the Bayside Road.
Oh, God, that's hopeless.
Well, the problem is Water Street, traffic backed up 8 miles.
Is it now?
Well, I do. 5:30, maybe it's a little better. Did you said you came in Water Street?
Yeah.
It was pretty bad at 4.
Well, it took me from Water Street to here, probably.
When you backed up in traffic?
Yeah.
You know.
Maybe 10 minutes. Well, that's how you elect a chair.
And that's what I was thinking, just call the meeting to order.
Yeah.
You know he'll take it. So.
Well, no, I want to make sure you got it. Kathleen.
Call him, meet Donna, elect him, and move on.
Yeah, because everybody knows Fred. Yeah. Sorry. I know, he's like gum on your shoe, you just can't get rid of it. Sure, we can go around the table. Kathleen Millens, Town of Stoyton's Town Manager.
Tom Wilgoss, Select Boards, Town of Surrey.
Hi, everyone. Paul Bissonette. I'm the mayor of Bucksport.
Dan Leader, Select Board, Casting.
Sam DeBella, Select Board, Hancock.
Drew Inlet, Town Manager, Mount Desert.
Mark Blanchard of Ellsworth.
Cool. Well, we're on call the meeting to order. Do you have any nominations for a chairman?
Second.
See, you can't decline. Any more discussion? All those in favor? Well, he ain't here. Do you have any nominations for a vice chair?
Second.
Oh, I don't know, I was gonna do. We're gonna get you trained in. Let's do Paul.
You want me to withdraw my nomination?
Yes, please.
I will withdraw.
A second.
Those in favor?
All those in favor? All right, Paul, you can start the meeting until the honorable Fred comes in.
All right. So it looks like the next item on the agenda is to set schedule of meetings. It looks like we have a schedule set for this evening at 5:30, and then the next, at least a potential of 3 nights. The next 3 Wednesdays at 6 o'clock. Is it safe to assume that's okay with everyone?
Mr. Vice Chair. Next Wednesday, I can't do. Could we switch to Tuesday on that?
I can't do next Tuesday. Wednesday is the only night I have.
All
Does
Wednesdays, all Wednesdays.
That's usually what we do, when I've had a commitment for 3 months, I may, we skip a week, push it ahead.
My son is getting married the week of the 16th, so I can zoom in on the 16th, but I can't be here in person.
That's fine. Nobody can, I just can't be here that night, that's all.
You still have the 23rd free.
Yeah, I know, we've got because October's got like an extra week in it for us.
Yeah, we do have the opportunity to skip next week and do the 16th and the 23rd, and then if absolutely necessary, we could go on Wednesday the 30th, but I guess I'll leave it to the pleasure of the committee.
In favor of that. If any of those days I can't be in person, I can help this event.
All right. So it looks like the schedule will be, we will take next week off, come back on the 16th, come back on the 23rd, and if necessary, be here on the 30th.
Thank you.
All right.
Department schedules stay the same, or will the 16th month to the 23rd?
The one for the 9th will
Not
go to
into
the
the 9th.
16th,
Okay.
and then shove on down for the these ones here tonight.
I would just say worst case scenario, if we had a department head that had a conflict based on that change, I'm assuming you'd be willing to let them switch around, is that safe to say?
Let's see, looks like the next is the remote participation policy. It's already come up, but we do have a sample policy. And I know that the commissioners, it is the policy of the county of Hancock to allow elected members of the Board of County Commissioners, employees, and the public to participate in public meetings by remote means.
So if I can real quick, the only reason I brought this up is we did have a member that had asked about zooming in tonight, and we hadn't really discussed it before. If you look at the MMA, I'm sure some of the other administrators here could tell you that, you know, you can interpret that a couple different ways, but I wanted to make sure the committee itself had ruled on being okay with these being remote and any votes, if you're gonna take them that way, being done as well, because the policy that you have in front of you that the commissioners talks about the Board of Commissioners, but it doesn't necessarily explicitly say the BAC or any other board or committee, but I understand like by default, kind of MMA has suggested that that would be included, but I wanted to give you the information and then let the committee decide if you want to proceed that way. We're obviously live right now, so not that anybody's on there, but we are technically broadcasting.
I think it's a good idea, that way it's clarified, nobody can kick up a fuss,
Yeah,
especially.
I love transparency.
Well, a lot of people concerned about taxes, so we'll clarify. I motion we adopt it.
Have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Moving second, any questions? In Favor?
Paul?
Yeah.
Can we go back for a second to setting the meeting schedule?
Sure.
I know the DA is going to be gone on the 16th. He's not available that entire week. I'm wondering if we can move maintenance into the 16th and move him down to the 23rd.
Do that preemptively now, okay.
Yeah, Michael can work out some of those department changes.
So the 28th and the 23rd. I know maintenance had a conflict with the 9th, which is kind of why we originally removed them, but I think he's okay for the 16th, so.
All good with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Next is the first budget to take a look at. Do we want to wait for who we're expecting to arrive before we begin that discussion? I don't know how close he is, or do we just want to proceed?
And stuff in traffic there.
No, he is here.
Oh, yeah. Andy. Yeah, maybe we should wait. Andy,
Before we get started, can I ask a question? Maybe. I'd like to, it seems from what I'm reading that the,
Hi there, are you available to present your budget?
that the budget's being
Okay.
overshadowed
That's what others thought
by
as well.
the
Okay, thank you.
question of the jail healthcare for inmates. And I'd like to get some clarification on why that's coming up now. Is this something new to the law? It's causing us to have to include in the budget this year. It seems to stand out as a very negative influence on the overall impact of the budget.
So if I can speak briefly on it, the county had been advised by an attorney, it wasn't necessarily our attorney, but his attorney that represents the county on other matters, that the county should consider looking at how it provides its services at the jail right now. So when we met with that attorney, he helped the commissioners and staff essentially craft an RFP to go up and find out what the cost of inmate medical services and the mental health treatment would be out there in the market. Because basically it was felt that they were concerned that we needed to be doing a better job than what we're doing, and the reason we were doing what we were doing is because they've been attempting to do it on a shoestring budget. But the reality is we were advised that that's not a legitimate excuse for not having funding, is not a legitimate excuse for not providing the level of care that's required on the law. So when we went out to bid, the bids came in depending on, there's variations. We're meeting with the attorney this week to discuss them again, and then there'll be a recommendation made to the commissioners. The bids range from like 600,000 to 700,000 all the way up to 2.2 million. So they kind of picked a number that they think is going to be reasonable. When we look to see what it is that we asked for, what is absolutely required by law, that we know we have to provide one way or the other, and hope to get even less than that, but plugged in around that 900,000 figure to kind of put it somewhere in that targeted range to get an idea of what that's going to impact. The reality is the commissioners are damned if you do, damned if they don't. If they exceed the cap for the jail, they exceeded the cap for the jail. But if we don't provide medical services and something happens and we get sued, we're going to be liable for it. So that's the juggling that's going on right now. But the reality is the county's tried for a long time to be compliant, to try to provide the best services. But the cost of doing that now is just, there's no way we can do it and keep up with the standards, is what we're being told.
So we've been in non-compliance for several years, and we're trying to get caught up, basically.
I mean, arguably, if you listen to what we're being advised, you could say to a degree that that's quite possible.
I believe there's a movement around the country to prevent recidivism, and there's been studies on if inmates get more medical, mental health care while they're in jail. Yes, it costs more now, but they're saying over a longer period of time, then it's actually a benefit to the budget of the county. Of course, we don't know. There's been many studies that have said that.
Well,
We,
What,
yeah, we haven't considered anything like that. We're just
Okay.
trying to live up to the state mandate.
Okay.
and I think that's the thing that you might have missed here, is that they passed a law. This is something the entire state has to do now. So it was predicated upon a change in law that forced us to do this.
Yeah, when was that law? Put into
Last
effect?
last legislative term.
The last term?
Every county in the state now is facing this. And several of the counties have said, you can't have it both ways. You can't cap us and expect us to pay $1 million for this coverage that you mandated on us, not giving us the funds. So there's a lot of counties like us that say, go ahead and sue us for exceeding the cap. We'd rather get sued by the state for exceeding the cap than by the plaintiff because we didn't supply the service that was mandated by statute. So it's a law that really is pushing us and other counties to do it this year.
So we don't have a choice.
Pardon?
If it's by law, we don't have a choice.
That's what we think.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're facing two laws, the
Right.
cap law and the mental health.
well, and also too, I mean, this is just another case of the state cost shifting onto the counties. And I mean, the people that's incarcerated, unfortunately, I mean, they're not allowed to go on Medicare or Medicaid to cover the bills for the jail, which is state statutes. And I mean, you know, the state should be picking up this expense, the state statutes, and I mean, how much can counties and towns? And they keep shifting down with us, whether it's the educational thing that they've chipped away at now. So I mean, all of these things that are coming down the pipe are just gonna increase it for people with local taxes. And they may not realize, and it's very difficult for us to communicate that on any level, whether it's town level, you know, the commissioners or whatever. And I mean, the state's gonna take more responsibility on this. Cannot keep cost shifting onto us all the time.
Sorry for the digression, but, you know, it just stood out, you know, the budget impact is really driven by that one item.
And you'll find that in your book, it's under the jail slash, Department 24. You see the 910 on there,
Yep.
under the health.
Notice that, stands right out.
Well, it does, and also too, the other mechanism is, you guys all know as well as I do, when we pass off a tax bill, there's usually the three things on it. You know, there's the school, the county, and what you got for your town thing. And people come after us. It's a very different process with the legislature. Not everybody goes to Augusta or knows how to navigate it, so, you know, they don't get the being chased around the town grocery store. Why is my taxes so high? So. Might as well just say it the way it is.
Anything else on that? Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I will turn it back over to you, but I'll give you a brief update on what we've covered so far. We adopted the agenda for this evening. We've elected myself as vice chair and you as chair.
Excuse me. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. We've set a schedule of meetings, the meetings that were given to us. We are skipping next week due to several conflicts. So the next meeting will be Wednesday, the 16th, then the 23rd, then the 30th. And the only other change of vote right now is that on the 16th, maintenance will take the place of the district attorney. That's all.
IT needs to be swapped out too.
Yeah, they were already working.
Well, no, they need to be swapped out of the 16 because it's on the
IT needs to go to the 16th. Okay, we'll let you figure that out.
Yeah.
And we're also allowing remote participation here. And that's where we are, sir.
Well, there.
We didn't need you over there.
What?
We didn't need you out. We're thinking of you.
You were you?
We going around the table and introduced ourselves?
Oh, yeah, and when I told you the predecessor.
That's just it. Okay.
I told them everybody knew me.
Yeah.
All right. That being the case, I guess we'll go right to EMA.
Good afternoon.
Good evening. You're up. Go for it.
All right, thank you. For the new members, I've prepared a one-page information sheet if you're not entirely familiar with emergency management in Hancock County and what our role and missions are and how we're funded, and hopefully that's a concise explanation for you. And with respect to the budget, we don't have any increases over last year, other than I think our personnel benefit costs. Typically, Mr. Chair, you start with the revenues.
Yep. So the revenue proposals, the department head for 2025 is proposing $89,626, and the commissioners are in concurrence with that. Do I have a motion?
Oh,
Second.
Then move to second. Is there any discussion on revenue?
Yes, just, I know it's explained here in brief, but if you could just talk about why the revenue in line 100 is down from last year.
Certainly, there's been a 10% national reduction federally that's coming into the state of Maine. The state has in turn passed that on to each of the 16 counties.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, so indicate by raising your hand. Opposed? You get the count? On expenditures, the department head for 2025 is proposing $237,934. And the commissioners are in concurrence with that. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second. We'll move in second. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor, so indicate by raising your hand. Opposed? Motion carries. Registry of probate, thank you, Andy.
Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone.
What is that?
Eight.
Eight.
Appropriators eight.
Thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone.
Well,
How are you? Good. I actually have prepared an additional memo and some data for you that I'd like you to take and just pass around. The reason I did that is because technically there are recommendations that did not make it onto the final budget that was approved by the commissioners and sent to you tonight. But I felt that it was important to advocate for my department and myself while I had the chance. So we can either go over my memo first, or if you'd like to have your questions answered first, just let me know.
Well, if you don't mind, we'd like to have a few minutes to review.
I was actually going to offer to read it if that was helpful, but if you want to read it, you can.
You have copies for the commissioners and for me?
Yes. Sorry, Michael.
Don't worry, my way. Sorry, I know.
I'll email you a copy.
Everybody good?
Good.
Any comment?
Are you taking comments on, you want to take comments on this first? Be happy to. Yep, so if I'm looking at the numbers real quick, and I read through briefly, the commentary that you put together. Next year, you're likely facing a situation where your deputy will be outpacing you in salary. And if I'm looking at the salaries across the board for the other department heads, you're around $9,000 lower than the next department head. And depending on how the deputies' salaries work, there could be theoretically deputies in other departments who are outpacing your salary. So I guess my question is, how have we gotten to this point?
I think I have an answer for
Okay,
that, sir.
love to hear it.
Please bear with me. I think probate has a history of being sort of a forgotten department. I don't think that we have been as active in department activities such as budgeting and other activities because we miss most of the meetings that are held on Tuesdays during the commissioner's office. So I love my work. I love my work so much, I focus on probate almost too much. And my narrow focus, it was to the detriment of my department because it took me until now to realize that there was a discrepancy. I think historically, probate has had leadership that has been there for a long time. And for whatever reason, maybe it was cultural, maybe it was generational, they didn't advocate for anything beyond what was presented as, what was going to be presented as the COLA. I can't find any documentation where there was any sort of major asks or recalculations of either the pay grade or the department or the department head. Probate is on the 6th pay grade. And I'm not, and I realize that there's a lot of work I think that's going to need to overcome to bridge this gap. I don't expect it will happen in one budget cycle. I understand that we're going to be having to probably adjust this over a year or two. But the work that is done in probate court is more along the lines of the work that is done in the DA's office as legal secretaries, which I've also done. And so the pay scale first is underpaid. And longtime employees have been there for a long time. And I don't know if it was just a matter of having dual incomes and not a need to advocate for raises or whatnot, but the times that we are living in now, where we have inflation, price of electricity going up, groceries going up, heating fuel going up, and that we need to take into account how much it costs just to live here in Hancock County. And I'm afraid that if probate doesn't address this issue, it will only get worse. I have a suspicion that because the department heads or the elected officials, there's really no mechanism to like the pay scale steps that we have for the employees. I think it's really fallen on the burden of the department head. And I can speak only for myself, but in the 4 years that I've been doing budgets, there's been a vastly different experience each year. And what I've learned this year, I might not have been able to realize or appreciate 2 years ago. And I might have taken bad advice. Like, don't ask for anything, you probably won't get it. I realize it's my error and that I need to do better advocating for my staff and for myself. And so that's why I put together the paperwork that I did for you today.
And also, the world has changed dramatically.
The world has changed and our caseload has changed. Probate court has a lot of complex litigation regarding adult and minor guardianship and probate estate litigation. And we are doing all essentially the same work as the civil servants here in the district courts and superior courts.
So I was gonna ask you, what's your caseload looking like?
I can speak to that partially. I have to double check with Terry Harding, who's the clerk here in Ellsworth. But as far as the civil cases, I have a sheet, and I'll pass it around. The 2023 judicial audit showed me that Ellsworth District Court's civil cases were 1,127. I had in my probate court 507. I have 2 staff members. I can't even tell you how many staff members are in district court. We are getting over saturated in complex cases, and they're requiring all the same, that we follow all the same civil rules and procedures that the civil code demands. So it takes a lot of careful work and training and attention to detail to make sure that it is done properly.
And it's important work.
And it's very important work. In fact, it's, and this is the example I had. The probate department is seeing more cases of minor guardianships in this last year than we have in the 2 years before combined. Grandparents are stepping in and petitioning the court very often under emergency circumstances and filling in for the grandkids' biological parents who are absent for one reason or another. So we have a lot of ongoing cases because those cases remain under the jurisdiction of probate. So we have annual reports and annual accountings, and it's not just done and shelved for the rest of its life. There's still a lot of contact we have with each file moving forward.
Does your lack of staff then impede progress being made on other fronts, whether probate and wills, whether it's the guardianship, holding up the courts and stuff like that, because you simply just don't have the
Yes,
manpower to
I have-
deal with
I
some
have
of it?
2 full-time staff, and I apologize, I misspoke. I have a part-time staff. But honestly, in this work, we need another full-time person. I've never asked for that because the impression I got through my previous experience was that it was a tough road to hoe and likely not to prevail. And I accepted that answer, and that was my fault.
What happens if you can't, some of these things are time sensitive. I mean, what happens if you can't, if you're short staffed and the workload is high, what happens?
Well, I do it.
You do.
Is there any mechanism, or is it embedded in state statutes that you can't raise the filing fees for an extra position?
Well, I'm really glad that you brought that up. There's going to be an update. I do have a slight legislative update. The Maine Association of Registers of Probate are going to be looking to change the language so that the filing fees and the other miscellaneous fees can rise with the cost of inflation. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a legislative act to increase them. So that means every year we'll have an opportunity to review and raise filing fees. We're also addressing the filing fees for the formal probate matters that maybe are around $100 today. We're looking to increase them to $150 to $200. We're also looking to ask for some fees to be assessed. One fee being an indigent county fee, which would be a surcharge that every application would pay, and it would go into the Hancock County's budget for the indigent legal services that we already budget for, and we go over budget for. So we're looking for ways to increase revenue. And I know I've clarified that process with the commissioners, and now that I can, and it's clear by the Maine Supreme Court has said any fees right now that district court charges, we can charge. So for example, if somebody wants something notarized, that's just off the street, we can now charge $5 for that, or $10, which we hadn't done because we are courtesy and very friendly. But we realized that that is an income and revenue generator. So we're doing our best to increase revenue.
Well, and also too, some of the stuff that's in statute and stuff, and I think even some of the towns are doing this for some of the work that's either complement with the state or whatever. The reimbursements that we get just aren't enough to pay for staff time, the overhead and everything else. I got that with motor vehicle and I'm almost ready to throw it right out through the door because I'm tired of doing it. You cannot have, subsidize that. And it's a problem, I agree.
The information on the handouts available on the county webpage?
Probably, the information that I provided you all came from the Hancock counties of budgets that have been printed. I went through and entered the data. The register survey, was a compilation from administrators and what I could view publicly on county websites.
This is my first meeting, so if I'm asking an obvious question, excuse me. So your salary is 54,308.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just for argument's sake, I'm putting that you work a 40-hour week, but I'm sure you don't. So that would work out to $26 an hour for a little more than people are making fast food.
Did you say I don't work a full time?
No, I'm saying you probably.
Oh, okay,
I'm
yes.
saying, I would assume with your workload,
Okay.
you're not working a 40-hour week, but I'm just saying that if you based it on a 40-hour week, it works out to be $26 an hour.
Does the county have a program in place for step increases for non-union?
Not that I am aware of.
No,
There seemed to be take a turn,
they
pick
have,
a number.
for non-union hired employees, there's a scale, but not for department heads or elected. There's nothing.
Isn't a request for a wage increase, doesn't that come under the purview of the commissioners first? Rather than to the BAC?
Yes, and it wasn't until I attended a department-wide meeting and saw people advocating for raises from 5% to 25% that I realized I had not done my due diligence. And so then I went back to the books and I looked at all the departments, heads and administrators, and realized that there had been a discrepancy and it had been ongoing.
Has your request been run by them first?
They are aware of it.
And was it discussed at any?
They told me to bring it to the BAC, so I am.
All right, as long as it-
As- yeah.
Budget does go to them, then they turn it over to us, then it can go back to them and they can either add.
And I would like to add a little bit more to my comment in that I don't know if it's the nature of how this budget is done or how this county does budgets, but it's very insular and every department obviously needs to be looked on its own face value. But I was also doing that, not realizing that I wasn't advocating the best way for my staff. And also realized that there was no one advocating for me. And it was clear that this has been a trend for several department heads before me. And I just wanted to, unfortunately, I did not notice until after I presented my budget to the commissioners. And so I took the opportunity to sort of think outside the box and approach this committee with this information.
Having two different levels of increase for two groups of people seems to be unfair to me. We're talking about it 2 times difference. And I don't see how you can rationalize that in this day and age where inflation has hit everybody, whether you're a director or staff employee. So it seems to me that we have to do something about that.
Our experience in Castine has been, we've had some turnover recently. And whenever a new position opens up, people who have been in a job for a long time and a new person comes in, the salary levels are so much higher that what we've done is we brought in new people at higher salaries, and then we had to raise all of the employees accordingly, percentage-wise, because it wouldn't be fair that position A was $50,000, now we're paying 65, and then you've got people who are like, wait a second, and so we did an overall town-wide increase on salaries to kind of be fair to everybody.
And I recognize that this is a somewhat ambiguous ask. And I want to say that it's not my intention to force it upon anybody. I just really felt like this was my opportunity to speak up, since the prior 2 registers of probate did not. And I wish I had said something my first couple of years through the budget cycle, but I honestly did not feel as prepared as I do now to understand the budget and how it goes through the different levels that it does. And previously, it might seem like one department will take a raise one year and another department had to take a raise, and sort of like a take-turn status. But again, I feel like probate was never really invited to the table in that regard, and I take responsibility for my 4 years, but that is why I'm highlighting it today.
Can you hold probate court on a day other than Tuesday? The commissioners?
I would have to coordinate with the Maine judicial system, just to make sure that we could do a trade to like Wednesday.
Is that, okay, listen.
And I would also check with the judge, but I would be very much in favor of doing that work in order to be able to participate more fully as a department head.
If you didn't come here tonight, do you know what your wage would be in 25? Has that been?
Yes.
If we approve it for 6.
Yep.
On the expenditures line,
And I would probably be looking for an additional job.
$56,046.
For
Department 8.
Bill?
That's not entirely correct in that in order to show some increase that we knew was going to happen in the 25 budget, we as commissioners, the financial people and Michael wanted to put something in there so that it reflected some increase, but we didn't want to make that final decision till after we got the budget back, so we could see what the impact of your decision, your advice to us, and everything else. And then we would talk before we finalize the budget with exactly what increase we were going to give. So the 3.2 is the federal, what is it? The Social Security COLA. That's all that is. We've given that to all the non-union employees, including department heads. And we've told them a number of times, this is not going to be the number specifically. This is simply placeholder for an increase that we will decide upon later. So that could be anywhere from the 3.2 that we budgeted up to, I don't know, 10%, depends. And it could be different for different department heads. So the number you're seeing simply reflects the 3.2, but it probably does not reflect what our final decision is going to be for non-exempt, and for the non-union.
Could we find out what the total cost impact would be if all non-union employees were to receive the same amount as union employees, which is 6%. Because there are other departments that have the same issue and are only receiving 3%, but it also goes into, affects the pension cost and other costs. So there's probably some math involved in determining what the total cost is.
And quite frankly, it's all departments. You know, they're really, I touched on it a little bit, some departments have come in with COLA, some have come in with numbers less than that, some departments have come in with 11%. I think that 11% is accurate. So it's all over the board. So, you know, and listening to this, keep in mind that this issue is throughout all departments. So
That's my concern, that it does affect all departments, but we don't know what the total cost impact is. You know, if you were to provide the union benefit to all employees, you know, how much would that cost the county?
well, and union, there's three bargaining. There's three units, I guess is correct.
And those have different increases.
Yeah,
And some of them, in fact, one of them is being negotiated this fall, and we don't even know what it's going to be. So it's not one union rate.
It seems to me that there's two issues. One is that you've got a department that's paying almost 15% less, 13% less than any comparable. And then you've got the bigger issue of how you deal with you know, the non-union employees.
and the issue is some department, you know, there are different skill sets that have different, you know, there's some inconsistencies there. You know, that it's, I'm not sure you could apply the same rate to each department.
Yeah.
Paul, has there ever been a survey of the different probates around to see where we stand compared with them?
Or,
That would get into your skill set issue. I mean,
exactly.
we're paying 56 and the average is 65 around the state.
That's actually in the handout.
Is it?
Well, for this,
some of it.
for
Mhm,
pro.
yeah, for who replied.
I guess I'm gonna ask this question anyway, even though I understand what it's gonna sound like when it comes out of my mouth, and I perhaps don't mean it the way that it's gonna sound. But when I hear that this department comes in with this, and this department comes in with that, and this department comes in with that, the perception that creates is that there's no strategy behind it. Perception that's created is that there's I'll say it, it's willy-nilly. So if I'm wrong, I'd love to be corrected. But at some point, it seems to me that perhaps we would consider this and put some sort of strategy behind it. Because if this hadn't been brought up this year, theoretically or hypothetically, this budget committee could be meeting next year and having a conversation. And if it wasn't brought up, one of us sitting here asking the question, why is the deputy about to make more than the person running the department? That too would indicate a lack of strategy.
I think in order to answer your question, what I can say is the department heads have met and are creating a consensus. And I think you will see as you go through the VAC meetings that there will be a clear and concise 6% request for the staffs.
That actually is good, because it sounded like I was picking on the commissioners there a little bit, but it's kind of,
No,
it's a moving target for them too.
Well, that's why
Yeah.
we noticed. I have to give credit to Administrator Kirkwood. We had a department-wide budget meeting, the first that I remember, maybe not, but that's where I became aware of the different percentages, and it was concerned.
Yeah.
I was concerned because if it was, and I think what we agreed upon is what I have spoken to here in my memo, and I think what you'll find as the majority of department heads come through the BAC they will probably be citing similar.
Well, I'll tell you though, that several years ago, the county hired a professional consultant who came in and developed a process for evaluating the wages and based upon responsibilities for non-department head employees. So we had a very objective, articulate process that it still kind of holds true today. Even that consultant said, don't try to take that process and apply it to department heads because everybody gets to top pay on this. So we don't have that kind of a plan for a process for department heads. And quite honestly, it's been somewhat willy-nilly.
Yeah, okay. Well, and to be fair, I mean, I was, you point out in the first or second sentence of your memo here that you're thanking the administrator and the treasurer now and kind of seem to illustrate, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but it perhaps was a different experience prior to the people you named here. So, and I can understand. And so it does sound like perhaps there's an effort here to, and as Commissioner Clark said, bring this also, bring this to the committee and have us have a conversation about it and then take a look at it after the fact as well. But it just is as you might expect, I'm concerned too, because there's been a lot of conversation, certainly in the town I represent, but also in this room in budget committee meetings where we've talked about making sure that people are being paid competitively. And it just, I mean, let's call it what it is. Even if you look at what you've outlined here from what the people that you've responded, you're being paid at the low end of what would be competitive amongst your peers. And then there's the issue of the deficit of set to outpatient in the coming fiscal year, which is problematic on a number of levels.
I will say that I think the county has some of the best employees in the state. I know the people that I work with, not only in my department, but in this building, have a very strong sense of pride in the work that we do and our ability to work together. And so I think you'll see moving forward, the department heads trying to acknowledge that and advocate for their staff and themselves.
But the other thing is though too is, given the revenues with the county budget, whether it's your probate fees, whether it's the registry of deeds, civil service or whatever it is. I mean, I'm not sure just where, whoever should be doing that advocacy to change the statutes or the things, they're not being competitive with today's things. So, I mean, I don't think that falls under the, purview of you guys, the commissioners, to say the fees in the county aren't enough. So bolster that, change the law, change the statute to be able to do it. But, that just really has to be done. You have to be competitive in your revenues or meet your costs on it because, I mean, Paul's right. I mean, there's only so much we can put on the taxpayers. But if somebody's using these services and they're gonna make money off it or get something, whatever, then that needs to be ratcheted up. So we can bridge some of that.
And I believe that the Maine Association of Probate Registers is on task to do that from now on. We have a younger generation that has a lot of interest in the legislature and making sure that things stay current with inflation. And because prior to our recent.
Hopefully they can work on the jail. Too.
Yes,
That's the real problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Because prior to our most recent legislative update, the fees hadn't been changed in probate for 20 years.
So the fees people are paying today is the same as,
No. We had a recent change in 2019.
okay,
From that time, from before, the fees were the same for like 20 years. So probate is a little behind, but we are catching up. And not only are we caught up in fees to 2019, we're also going to be pressing for legislation that will allow our fees to increase annually without having to go back to the legislature. If that makes sense.
I'd leave a little wiggle room in there because you've got some counties that may be a little bit more complex than others. I mean, Hancock County has got a hell of a lot of old people in it. I'm not trying to be disparaging, Another county might have younger people, so your work mix, you know, with all due respect, could be totally different. You know, a lot of the retirees are on the coast, that's where they wanna be, and the inland ones may not be so much, so I'd leave myself a little wiggle room and have my plan B in there and override it.
What do you see fees increasing next year? Not the total amount, but the per amount. Let's say on a name change, on a adoption, whatever it may be.
I'd say they're probably, I think I can give you a dollar amount. They're going up to about $25 to $50 for the regular petitions. And then the filing fees for probate, which is based on the certificate of value, that's going to be increasing with inflation. I'm not sure if that answers.
And how many transactions are there a year? So if you took that $25 or $50 increase, okay, you know, is it, how many hundreds or thousands of transactions are there?
I really don't, I'm not sure. I think I haven't done, I'm hesitant to give you an actual figure because I haven't done that math. I feel comfortable estimating that our revenue could potentially increase 1 to 2% per year based on what we're trying to achieve at the legislature this year. Is that answer?
Yeah, what I'm thinking is, you know, if you had 3,000 or 5,000 transactions a year at $50 a pop, it's pretty easy to come up with how much more income. And do you get, when those fees go up, does that money go exclusively to your apartment, or is it shared in any way?
Into my department.
Yeah, in the revenues, you know, what you're talking about is that $140,000 number. You're asking how much, what's that number going for what?
Yes.
And so 1 to 2%,
Oh, I don't think I spoke right then.
that's why.
Okay.
It's already up 3.5%.
Yes.
Yes, and I believe that we will exceed that.
Like last year, the budget was 135, and where we're at January through September is 131.
So to be clear, in real numbers, if that were to go up to the level, and I'm not holding you to this, I just want to make sure I'm thinking it correctly. You could expect that number on the revenue, on that revenue line to go from the 140 that's in the budget for this coming year from the department, from you and the commissioners, could go up approximately $20,000.
I think it's possible.
A bit more, okay.
Mhm. I think with reassessing the fees and updating our filing fees and making sure that Hancock County keeps abreast of what the civil system's doing to make sure that we always match. For example, their mailing fee is $5 to mail something, that's gonna be our mailing fee. You know, ours used to be 2, I can make it 5 like that.
But also too, this is providing a service, because it's like last year's budget, you had, it looks like 285, that we had, you took in, 208 for your revenues. So I mean, that department's going backwards like $90,000, and it really should be evened out. That should be what, you know, at least, and a little cushion, whatever. Because to me, if you're providing a service, you shouldn't be going backwards, and it either being subsidized by something else. Anything else that charges fee, whether it's the deeds or the rest of it. Because that way that alleviates some of the stuff with the county tax burden. If people who are utilizing that particular service pays appropriately. And that means paying for this building and the staff and everything else.
But for the 9 months, 2024, 131,000 was collected for filing fees versus a $135,000 budget. So they've almost turned the budget during the 9-month period.
Is there any month that's more than any other, or just average? Well, based on that statement, from 2024 actual 131, you're on par to take in $175,000.
Possible.
Not sitting more than that in expenses or will for next year.
On
Well,
the,
no, that's, I'm saying that they're in line, but if the monthly amounts remain consistent, they're in line to take in $175,000. They got 3 months left. They're taking in $14,000 a month in filing fees.
That's the best case example, the best scenario to happen, but
That's probably won't happen.
And that's without the increases that she's talking about.
right, and that's with the current levels that I charge.
Because we don't know what the increases are.
Correct.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying is, I asked if the monthly income remained fairly consistent for 9 months. And is it remain consistent monthly on a year-round basis? Do you have any months where nobody dies, nobody submits a will?
You'll die in the winter.
I will say there's an increase in the winter, but I would say overall, the way I look at it, it's an average monthly, because we just don't control when people pass away. Who passes away and whether they're an out-of-stater with 2 vacation homes on the island, or that, there's some things that are out of our control.
And if you take in more income than the budget, what happens to that surplus?
Unassigned fund.
Yeah,
It's just increased revenue for the budget. In her case.
on your wages, when you leave here tonight, let's assume you don't get the 25%.
To be clear, I wasn't really asking for 25%.
I understand.
Okay.
But when you walk through the door on your way home tonight, what would make you say, okay, I didn't get 25, but I'm happy with that, with what I got?
A percentage, you think?
Yes.
I think a starting point for because this might take more than 1 year to equalize. A 10 to 15%.
Listening to you, I can tell that you know your stuff. And seeing the wages, you versus the other 15 counties, that, yeah, you're on the low end, to say the least. Me personally, I would have a 10% figure in my head. And like you say, as a starting point. I don't think that the department head and the man and the assistant department head, whatever the title is, should be that close, nip and tuck. I mean, you guys are within, what is it?
Couple $100.
Yeah.
I have a hypothetical question. If something happened to you and we had to go out and look for another person, okay? I can't imagine that the county could find a qualified person anywhere near this salary in this new world order. And so I think that we have to be realistic about just where we are, where we're at right now, and these are painful conversations to have, but it seems that whether it's private sector or the public sector, everyone is having this conversation about, how do we fix long-term employees that are paid less, and if we were gonna hire someone to do the same job, it would be a very different picture.
Yes, I think Hancock County has benefited from my belief in service. I think that the work that I do is a service. I'm not doing it to get rich. I'm not doing it to get famous. I'm not doing it to do anything other than help people. I don't always speak the loudest or exercise my voice, and it is incredibly difficult to do so, let alone in an election year. But I maintain that what has happened cannot continue as far as the probate staff or department head goes. So, and I think if anybody, if you were to hire, if you could just hire for this position, you're looking at spending between $70,000 and $75,000 minimum. And it would probably be more.
And this is an elected position, just to be clear.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is not, you wouldn't be hiring.
You wouldn't be hiring. You'd
Right,
have
right.
to find somebody to run.
Yeah. That's the thing you gotta remember too, is that the county of municipality is blessed with half of our department heads elected, not appointed. With our appointed department heads, we can bring them in and say, okay, this is a 40-hour plus work week for you. For elected, you can't. And if you remember, just a few short years ago or whatnot, we had an elected treasurer who didn't come to work at all for over a year. So my point is that we're very fortunate right now. Our elected officials work hard. They put in a full week. We don't have any problem with them not showing up. But the other problem we do have is that if Juliet either decided not to run or got defeated, the next person who may not have any qualifications at all is going to get a 3.2% raise on what she's getting at. Because unlike non-department heads, they don't have a scale. If we hire a new deputy, that deputy goes to the start of the scale and works his way up, even though he might have been replacing a 30-year retiree who's at the top of the scale. That's not the case with department heads. So there are other things that we have to factor in our decisions on what our department heads get. And we have to balance that out with elected versus appointed. I would caution you to be careful that you don't pick and choose what you think is an appropriate raise for a department head tonight until you hear all of them, because that's what we're going to do. Because if we give Julie at 10, how do I justify giving Julie Curtis indeed 6? How do I
Or
just
3.7.
3.7?
This is why I asked originally, isn't this under the purview of the commissioners?
Well, we have the final say, but we want to consider your advice. If you would suggest that Juliet should get a 10% raise, consider that impact on every other department head that's coming in after she does. And what about the one that wants the 25%? See, Julie wants 25, she got a hand up, waving
No.
her hand at you.
No, that is, no, I would just like to add that I have been here for 20 years, and occasionally department heads do have to be adjusted just as her pay needs to be adjusted. I mean, they don't always all get adjusted at the same time to get them where they should be, but I've sat right through a lot of meetings and watched them get adjusted, and actually gotten up in a meeting right behind someone who got 6% already in a year that it wasn't budgeted for, get a raise, and ask for a raise and be told no. And I said, anyway, I don't think so. And so I started advocating, but her pay needs to be adjusted. So people don't have a problem when others get put where they should be or closer to where they should be, so that it doesn't scare the budget all at once.
And I would like to point out that the commissioners have, I think, already approved close to a 20% raise for an admin assistant. That's been on the job for a year.
It seems to me that all of these departments should be surveyed statewide to try to come up with a figure, and those salaries for those positions should be somewhere in that range, somewhere close, and it's just the luck of the draw. I'm sorry you guys don't have any hiring authority, but I think a decision should be made on this is what the position's worth, and then as long as you've got this system where the people are being elected, then that's the way it is. And you might want to consider if there's any way to bring as many of these appointed positions, elected positions into the appointed fold as possible, then you would have that control. But I think saying, well, we can't raise this up to this particular level because we might get somebody that's no good going into it. Well, that's the luck of the draw, folks. Maybe if the salaries were at the appropriate level, then the people running for it might be more apt to be at the level you need. I don't know, but that's always going to be a problem as long as you've got this hybrid system.
Well, I would take a charter for the county.
Yeah.
That's what that would take. We tried that.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, unsuccessfully, right?
Yeah. Question I have is, no matter what the proposed raise is for non-union, how is that applied to the scale?
What do you mean, Fred?
Well,
You'd apply 3.2 to the scale.
In my probate department, are you speaking about my department specifically?
no, I'm talking countywide.
Okay.
I assume that each department has step increases based on longevity.
So you
Yes.
raise the entire scale by 3.2%.
Each step or just the
Yes.
bottom?
No,
No.
each step.
Every step.
Each number would have rejected 3.2%.
That was my question. All right,
We talked about the revenue figure in fees. Shouldn't that the fee income be raised? If you look back at 2023, 161,000 was earned versus 135 budget. So seems to have gone beyond that. Should we suggest raising the fee revenue to figure like 170,000?
If you do the math that Fred did, you get 175, 160.
I'm still new to budgets, so I'm not sure if I'm comfortable putting that down. Only because, as you'll see, the history has been fairly incremental, and that is a large drop, and I don't know if we don't meet that goal, what will the fallout of that be? I'd rather have more revenue.
well, I understand the question, but
The fallout would be the same as if you end up with more.
Right.
if it follows the same, you
Okay.
still have to cover the expenses.
Mhm.
But, so let's move on to take up the revenues. The department head revenue is 186, 115. The commissioners concur with that number. We have a proposal. Are you suggesting
Raising the fee revenue to 170, that'd be a $30,000 increase, which would make the number consistent with what we've earned to date for 2024 and what we earned for a whole year, 2023.
Yeah, but if you have expenses for 2025 of 298, and you think you're gonna have revenues of 186.
Plus 30.
Well, you're saying go 170, looking, if I might, the 2023 actual was up 163. I would be more comfortable saying 165.
I
So
would agree
170.
with that.
So is that a motion?
Yes, I'd like to make the motion that we increase the filing fee revenue to a figure of 165.
I'd second that.
Is there any discussion on that? Hearing none, all in favor, that gives a total of what?
100, sorry,
200 and what?
211.
211, 150.
211, 150. All in favor of 211, 150 for revenue, so indicate by raising your hand. Opposed, motion carries. Expenditures, the department head is 298, 370. And the commissioners concur with that number. Do I have any motions or suggestions or amendments or ideas?
We can recommend to the commissioners a different amount, say, on the manager, and they can take that into consideration. It doesn't mean that they have to approve it. But we should make some, if they ask us to take a weigh-in of what that should be, then I think we should come up with a number to send back to them at their request.
I do think though Commissioner Clark's advisement is it holds water, especially if I'm going to talk about strategy or lack thereof. That if we're gonna go in and present or propose an increase of X percent, that we in all likelihood are going to have to expect to do that in a number of places across the rest of this budget.
Well, maybe we just, I don't know, maybe I'm not making any sense, but if we, instead of a percent, we put in a number and then figure out what percent that comes to. So example, if it's 56,046, and let's say for the sake of argument, you raise that to 66,046, then you'd have what that percent would be, rather than going in reverse and saying this percent. Adding that number. Does that make any sense, or am I being just crazy? You plug in the raw number, the dollars, and then you figure what percent that is.
The schedule was 19%.
$60,000.
But then the commissioners can say that's too much. They're not providing arbiters on this, so, but I'm just using that as an example. I didn't suggest normally we put in 10,000, but that would be for an example if you did. So come up with a number that you think is fair, send it to the commissioners, and they can decide what to do with it.
Or could we put off approving the salary figures until the end, after the commissioners have had a chance to
Sure,
come up with a, the final number?
you can do that.
I don't think the commissioners are gonna do that. They're waiting for us to do something. Correct?
Yeah, it's,
Yeah.
balls in your court.
Yeah, ball and I.
We won't make a decision until we finalize the budget after you get back to us.
But everybody across the board is getting 3.2%.
Yep.
Collective.
Well, that's-
That's the placeholder, Kathleen, that's the placeholder. So in other words, we know there's gonna be something, so we plugged it in there, so the final number wouldn't be so shocking, so it's gonna be something.
Well, I know, but that's not like a big help to us.
Well, they're supposed to help.
I know, but they're telling us not to do something, so.
No,
You can't really think it.
Kathleen, if it's come back to us as a 34% increase, which
Well,
are
I
giving
know,
you
Bill, but you
the.
guys change it anyway with the statute, and those statutes for different counties are different ways, so we don't have the final authority anyway. Right?
We do certain conditions, but we can override.
They can override.
I know, they do every time.
Unanimous. Not every time.
but just to outline what we did is because there were requests all over the place, from nothing to 11%. We plugged in Social Security COLA across all departments. That's what that number is.
Well, the way I look at it, you've got two issues here. You've got the employees in at a non-union wage scale of 3.2%, and then you're looking at the department heads of the elected department heads, which is a different kettle of fish.
Elected and appointed.
Hmm?
They're not all elected.
No, but
Elected
you,
and appointed.
right, but you have that mix that you have to take into consideration.
I know, but really, in a way, it just feels like that we didn't get a good budget that had consensus ahead of time. We can review. Because it seemed like there's more than one was gonna come out of the woodwork,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Not one, everyone.
Everyone that's not in a union or covered by a union contract is gonna present.
I mean, I'm gonna just share my recent experience. I'm only 1 year on the select board in Castine. We had a town manager resign, and when we went to MMA to post the position, there were people in town that said, well, we should just pay what the old person got paid, and I think David, who retired, said that there was always this fear to have it over 6 figures as a town manager. He said now across the state of Maine, every town manager's salary is 100 plus.
Not
And-
mine.
Yeah, well, that's what I was told, you know. But I'm just saying that, you know, the reality is, the reality. What?
Kathleen wants to know if the spot's still open.
No, I'm just sharing my experience, and so
I
we
hear
had,
what you're saying.
we had to go out to the world and say, okay, this is what we're offering, and we had a lot of applicants as a result.
Mhm.
Had we done it where the former manager started 5 years ago, we probably wouldn't have any applicants.
Yeah, and I know there was a town advertising over in my way for public works, for plow drivers, CDLs are gold. And they were doing $10 more than what I doing, and I was paying top dollar. So you go to those ones there, and then you've got all the rest of them's gonna eat you alive when you go into the office if they don't. I understand totally.
I mean,
It's a hard situation.
It's a hard situation, but it's the reality, you know, and, you know, in these budget discussions are very difficult,
Mhm.
but you also have to have good people.
Yeah.
And
can't
people
find a
are struggling,
finance director.
and we have to realize that a lot of people are having trouble these days.
More than we know.
Well, what we do tonight is going to be revisited anyway.
Yeah.
We have the final votes at the last meeting.
Yeah.
Even though we adjourn for the evening, we're not adjourned, sin die until we complete the task, so.
And I just want to say, I wasn't looking for a final answer or anything tonight. I really just wanted the opportunity to take the time to just bring the subject up because I hadn't done it previously and it was overdue.
Bet you will know.
Yeah, well, now I'm going to be right on top of it. So.
Pretty,
It has been, it really has been.
Yeah, no, I applaud you. Thanks for speaking up. Not a lot of women do sometimes. And you get slapped down with it too, but you just gotta stand your ground.
That's right. And if there's any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I know I've taken up a lot of your time.
I guess I'm trying to, I don't think you have the answer, but like, if the revenue increases, if it's not having an impact, like if your department is not having an impact on the overall budget, because you're producing more revenue than projected,
Mhm.
I'd have to do the math to figure out if your salary increase, like, is that revenue increase salary? Because in a sense, it might be budget neutral. And if that's the case, it is a kind of a, I don't know if every department's gonna be the same way where the fees are so easily to see, but I mean, it's not gonna have an impact on taxes because it's being covered in fees. Which would
It's
be,
not-
You have to wait till you do that to me when I get up there, it's my revenue.
It's not necessarily neutral because her expenditures will never be covered fully by her fees.
okay,
Never.
Well, I mean, it's right here.
I know.
There's quite a difference, whereas
Okay.
you will see in other departments that they go for an even,
Oh, yeah, I know. I don't think
Revenue.
probate will ever be a money maker. It's a court.
It should. No, should. No, we are
Yes.
public servants. We are not
Just
here
because you're a
to
public
make.
servant doesn't mean that you take and put it on the taxpayers. If there's a
No.
specific service that they're doing, then there should be adequate compensation.
Right, but it doesn't mean that you're
Because it's
always
like a
gonna
little
make it.
enterprise fund.
Okay,
Yeah.
moving on.
Mr. Chairman,
All I know is that I will do everything I can to recoup as much revenue as I can moving forward to help the Hancock County budget.
Okay. The way I see it, we got two issues on this expenditure line, and we have to take into consideration what we're gonna do in the future. One is the non-union wage scale. Are we happy with the 3.2%? Not hearing any voices.
But would you be happier if you knew that it could probably be more? We're just gonna have to wait and sort that all out after we get the budget back. So, I mean, this 3.2 is not cast in stone.
That's what I'm saying, it's not cast in stone, but you had said you were looking for a recommendation from this.
We would acknowledge your recommendation. You know,
So,
we're still going to look at this in totality with everybody, with everything we know, and try to do something fair to everybody. And I can't tell you any more than that. We just have not tackled this. We don't want to tackle this till we get the budget back, because some of our decision could be made upon how big an increase are we looking at, whether or not we can afford what we'd like to give.
But I would say
Right
leave it
now-
at 3.2.
Right
I
now,
would
this
say
is
leave
a
it at
36%
3.2 for the time being.
increase.
and is there any recommendation on the manager? We have a department head, as I said, requested 298,370, and the commissioners concur with 298,370. Is that a motion, or do you want to make a change?
You can go two ways on that. If you go percentage, then it can be said that Juliet got, $5,600 increase. Well, another department head, who's, let's say, is making 75, got a $7,500 increase. If you go with a fixed dollar amount, then let's say 5,000, Juliet would, that's roughly, call it 10%. Then the one making 75,000 is gonna say, damn, she got 10%. It only works out to 6.5 for me. So you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't.
I understand that, but I'm still looking for a motion.
To be damned.
a motion on the salary.
A motion on the expenditure line of 298,370.
can I clarify one more thing, Mr. Chairman?
You may.
All right. As I'm doing the math for the deputy manager and the regular, we'll stick with the deputy manager for this discussion. 52,645 in last year's budget. This year, 55,359. That's a 6% increase.
That's because she gets a step raise. and
That's what I'm
cost of
saying, though. I
living.
just want to make sure that we're all on the same page there.
Yeah.
That is not a 3.2% increase.
It's 5.2.
But yeah, yep, you're right. But there is not something similar there in the manager's line. I just want to make sure that we're talking about, we're all on the same page with the numbers. The two lines below her, deputy manager and regular, I believe regular, it's exactly 6. And deputy manager, it's a little bit under 6. But for the manager line, that is 3.2.
Yeah, the other ones.
the non-union wage scale plus the 3.2. It's highlighted on the notes, but it didn't seem like we were there in the conversation. I wanted to make sure we were before we started taking.
In other departments, what's the differential between a manager and an assistant manager? I mean, is there a general spread?
It makes a difference on the longevity of the assistant manager. But
You have to look at it different.
The chief deputy makes $200 or something like that less than the sheriff by design. That was the sheriff's decision. He works, that's the sheriff's decision. He wanted his chief deputy to have that same earnings. So he's not complaining. So at least he wasn't last year.
So I have 17 years as the register of deeds. And my pay is 63 to 89 right now. And my deputy, who has 7 years, is 52. So if that puts a little perspective in it.
Did you say 62 or 50,
I,
your deputy?
52, and she's 7 years, and I have 17.
About 11,000 plus or minus.
Yep.
Still looking for a motion.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
I'll make a motion that we increase the manager's line from 56,046 to 59,738. 739. Changing the total to $302,063. And the increase overall to 5.8%.
302,000 what?
The problem is that now you're gonna have to increase your FICA and deductions.
Sure.
That's- Your motion is really tentative. It's insignificant right now.
The bottom line will change, yeah.
Yeah, the bottom line will change. Hearing,
What's the percentage?
And so what does that figure
I
out
have
percentage wise
6%.
for the just for the salary?
Yeah, I was giving you the numbers just for the salary. So basically all I'm suggesting is that we take the manager's number from an increase of 3.2 to 10%, with the understanding that has been said several times, and it should be the loudest part, that we will be revisiting this after we've considered all of the other budgets.
so 59,739.
9.
I have a second for that motion.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
And
You will make the necessary adjustments to the FICA, the COLA, and that'll change that bottom line. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Hey, Julie,
I'm here.
you're up.
Good evening.
Good evening.
How's it going?
Okay.
I'll be faster.
Okay. Do you have any comments you'd like to make before we start?
Sure. I just was curious as to if you saw my increase. Did you get that in your budget packet or not? I'm just asking. Because, I can go over it very briefly.
Increase of what? The wage you're talking about?
Yes. Not mine. I put in a cost of living raise for me and my employees of 10%. This, and, because you can't see my notes, but it was the 3% that we weren't given last year above the unions, the 3% that they giving us right now above the union, and the 1% to make up for the cost of the increase in healthcare to the lowest paid group of people in the county, because it was overlooked in one of the union contracts and they can't up their insurance rates for 3 years, but ours will go up every year. So I just wanted to know, but since then, all the department heads have met and we've discussed it and we are all going to probably ask for 6% cost of living. So just, I told you to be short.
Okay, under revenue, the deeds. Department head is $729,700. And the commissioners concur with that amount. Do I have a motion?
Hang on, let me catch up here. Run that by me one more time, please.
Revenue line.
Gotcha, okay.
Before you go. Can I add something before you vote on the revenue? If you all know your local legislature people, if you get out and ask them to vote, we have a bill that should be on in January that will increase our recording fees so that if this passed, that sometime next year our fees would change, which would put that line of 102 just below double.
Just below double, if that passed.
If it
You'd be looking at
passed.
Closer to 700,000.
It will,
If not-
it'll be, it would be over,
Oh, yeah.
on a bad year, it would be over 700,000.
But that change isn't gonna go in effect
Right.
at January,
No, it would probably go,
so the
July.
following year's budget.
well, no, it usually would go July
July,
if they did it in January, but the next year you definitely, no, you might see some of it next year, but it's,
So the fee line you're saying should increase above the
It's-
430
if it passes,
if it passes.
yes,
How long
You're
has
feeling
this
lucky.
fees been
2011.
increased to? So I think it's quite a while.
Do I have a motion on revenues?
That's a big if.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'll move that we accept both the department head and commissioner's figure of 729,700.
Then moved
I'll second it.
and seconded, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Expenditures, department head request is $382,353. Commissioners, $364,528.
If I heard you correctly a moment ago, this budget reflects a 10% COLA.
Yes, my request, but
And you're, but you said 6. Okay.
6.
Pretty sure I do.
You know, because they tell you to put in what you want. Gotta speak loud.
Yeah, I don't know if you was buying that.
Right, you know,
Selling a fire
I've
truck or
worked here.
something.
I've worked here 20 years, and there've been years there's been no cost of living for this group of people. And really hard pill to swallow was 0.5%. You thought the 0 was bad, the 0.5% was bad too.
Oh, I remember those years. when we
Yeah.
had the Great Recession and everything.
Do I have a
Seen a lot
motion
of it.
on expenditures?
Easy, yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna make one of those, anybody else is quicker.
Ask Monica if she's doing it over there.
I am not doing that.
Well, instead of
Good for
doing
you.
the math, why don't you verbalize what you're proposing and let's then figure it out?
All right. We can save some time. I would propose that we go with department head's recommendation of this evening of 6%. In the three salary lines, under personnel. Yeah, yeah.
I'll second it.
Then move the second of the motion is to go with a 6% increase in salaries. That would change all the numbers, and I don't have any idea what they are.
Or whatever they are, they are.
Whatever they are, we'll look at it when we get to the last meeting. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Treasurers, oh, thank you, Julie.
No, thank you. I told you I'd quit. Trying to know my stuff. You guys have a good evening. You, thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
How much money we got in the
I'm
bank?
sitting in a different chair. You want those numbers, you have to let me know, and I'll bring it with me.
You got any comments you'd like to
I have
make?
no comments. The interest income, you're gonna see a decrease because the ARPA money is going to start being spent down.
And the interest rate is dropping as well.
Yeah.
So on the revenue of the treasurers, the department head is 221,138. Commissioners concur. Do I have a motion? So been moved and seconded. Any discussion?
The question, how is the cash invested?
Right now, it's only in an interest earning checking account.
Okay, what rate are we getting?
I know banks, some banks are paying 5.4 now.
I
Before
don't,
the
I
interest rates
just
went
don't
down.
keep numbers on the top of my head, so.
So the one that we were paying was up around 5.14.
Yeah.
And now that's down, I think, around 4.8 with fixed.
You're getting that through a checking account?
Yes.
Yes.
It's like a sweep, though, isn't it?
It is not a sweep.
It's not a sweep.
How's it collateralized?
You're the bank. The bank has their own.
Did they do an insurance policy? Is that what
Yes,
they do?
yeah.
The first?
Machias Savings Bank.
Oh, okay.
We went out for a competitive RFP about a year and a half ago.
When is that agreement up?
I think it's a 4-year.
4 years? But they can vary the interest rate.
They can, yep.
We just took action on our rates, and I just don't
Yeah.
remember what.
Yeah.
I'll leave the basket of mine, play the banks.
I would say anything you can get fixed now, because I would expect that Fed's going to keep lowering rates. So, lock in what you can now.
Yeah, that's what our thinking was.
Yeah.
She wanted us to go with a sweep on this most recent update, but it's the same risk. You're still taking a chance of dropping the rates, so.
How's the audit stuff going?
The audit stuff, it's going. We had notes from the auditor. It's in progress. I don't know.
Any issues from the year before?
From 22,
You know,
nope.
what was that deficit on the side maybe we were looking at?
Yeah, and the unrestricted funds. The balance sheet shows a deficit on the unrestricted of $1.7 million. You know what that is?
I mean, the 22 one he just provided us with for the, and using your terminology, unrestricted, like 224 or something, I think.
For 22,
For 22. 23, it looks like it's gonna be positive, but that's still cutting into the from the amount of the deficit from the prior year. And some of that can also be arguably attributed to the fact that we've had to pay for jail expenses that we didn't have because we couldn't budget because they weren't part of the cap. So, I mean, that's, again, this is why we're trying to address all these issues. But there isn't a pot of gold for you to say to the commissioners that you recommend you take some of that, undesignated, whatever you want to call it, but basically the funds that aren't committed to something, there isn't really anything to draw on to help offset that cost this year or last year as well, obviously.
Yeah.
So currently, we don't have a deficit on the unrestricted
For
funds.
the unrestricted. Oh, well, we have a deficit.
You have a
We don't
deficit.
We don't have a positive balance yet.
Largely because of the jail cost.
Well, I mean, that's certainly, I think one of the big costs. Last year, we had to switch, or the commissioners instructed the treasurer basically to help offset some of that through the additional investments that weren't budgeted for. So, I mean, even with that, we still were short, so.
Is that gap growing larger
Well, I
from
mean,
previous years?
this year, for 223, which is tentative, because we don't have everything finalized yet, but that was a positive, I think, 64. So that cut into so we're still in deficit, but we're going the right direction at least, if that answers your question.
Is it growing now?
The deficit isn't growing wider, it's getting smaller. So it just depends on how you phrase it.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Expenditures. Department head is $208,543. The commissioners concur. Do I have a motion?
I move we accept 208,543.
Second?
Been moved and seconded. Did you second it? Oh,
Yes.
discussion?
Yeah, give me just a minute, I want to see what the big driver of the expenditure over 24. It's what, 12,000, give or take. No, a little more than that, 17.
salaries, and I have $1,000 in an equipment reserve line.
Payroll account we did.
And
Payroll services. is that-
payroll services, yep, we're starting right now with a new payroll company, but hopefully this is a good thing. It's overall, if you see there's, it's zeroed out on the time tracking services because the new company that we've gone with includes the time tracking services. So overall, it's about a $3,000 increase, but you would see an increase in there anyway from one year to the next. And then,
And there are other services in that new payroll stuff too that weren't provided before,
Yeah.
so.
Any other discussion?
I think the same payroll issue applies to the finance director and treasurer. They're included for 3.2%. Would that be a higher figure?
I'm not making any additional requests.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Department 20, health insurance is going to change with the changes that you're making tonight. It's driven by all the salaries, so whatever changes we have to make, of course, won't be set in stone. There's 16 as well. Or we're gonna do 16 as well.
Yes.
Good old debt service.
What the-
That's what.
So what do you recommend on 20 and 16? We wait until,
I would recommend that, yes,
That'll probably be one of the
especially,
last follow-up ones again.
especially 20, yeah.
Because it's gonna change depending on every single thing.
everything goes on.
Going on.
Do I have a motion to table section 20 and section 16
So moved.
till the end?
Second.
Move to second, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Just to do debt service.
Hmm?
Debt service.
You can if you want to. He just made a recommendation not to change anything. It's gonna be zero, it's zero anyway.
We just need to wait on that, correct?
Yeah.
Both 16 and, right, yeah, debt service and
16 also.
Yeah.
Okay.
Department 4 commissioners. Commissioners both recommend 0 on revenue. I have a motion. Vote. Second. Moving and seconded. Discussion. Right now, all in favor? Indicate. Opposed? Motion carries. Expenditures. Department head and the commissioners concur at $424,399. I have a motion.
So moved.
second.
Then moved and seconded. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
All 911, 10% raise.
Huh?
All 911, 10% raise.
You didn't speak up soon enough.
Oh, geez.
Sorry, already voted.
Been like Julie Henry. You can overrule us. Stay late and don't let you.
That's right, Billy, I want a head full of hair. Neither one of us is gonna get what we want.
Yeah.
Department 30, reserves. Department head and the commissioners concur on $72,708. Second discussion.
What are these reserves?
Well,
The group benefits are, it gets paid out immediately. It's budgeted for the year, but it's paid out in the next year. It's savings on behalf of the sheriff's department that get put into investments. And the group, the life death benefit is for the officer who lost his life a couple years ago, which gets, it's put in reserve to pay out the surviving spouse.
any other,
So why is that a reserve?
It has to be paid.
has to be.
Okay, so it was self-insured, the benefits?
I think under state statute,
Yeah,
it
it's
has to be paid.
statutory provision, obligation on behalf of the county.
And you building maintenance. So there's no reserves or not putting anything in it.
Not putting anything in it.
What's the balance of it? Oh, 552. Tiny letters.
Balance of
Pretty nice
five
to
hundred
it.
and 52,000.
Tiny letters.
Any other discussion? All in favor? To indicate, opposed, motion carries. Animal control.
Yeah.
By default, this kind of becomes my part a little bit. And the UT director also helps with this one as well, but this is just for the new members, the ones that weren't here. This is actually the second budget for this department that's ever been created. We started this about 2.5 years ago, so offering that regional animal control service, which municipalities in Hancock County that want to join and participate, pay into as well. So that's part of what you'll see for the revenues here for the first part to start with is the amounts that we get from those participating municipalities. And right now it's a $2,500. Well, right now we have 11.
11.
It fluctuates, but we've been around 10 or 11 since it started. And there's a $2,500 annual fee that municipalities pay in to help cover these costs. And then they're also charged the mileage and hourly wages reimbursed for their individual municipalities. And we're still,
That's the fee, is $2,500.
2,500 is the annual fee, and then we also charge that, the mileage, the hours, and there's a 3% administrative. And over time, this is we've had one full, not even full, 9 months budget of actual development. We've reduced it this year with what's proposed because we're not getting, the position's been budgeted for like 20 hours a week. He's not getting that right now. In fact, the summer, which we thought would be the busiest time period, he had some weeks where he had like one item, maybe a couple hours. And then as soon as fall hit, all of a sudden he's got 20 hours and other stuff. So average wise, we're still probably 5 to 8 hours under that 20-hour average that we built into the budget to start with. So, and hopefully next year, then we'll have 2 years and this number will either be different, or we come back at some point, have a conversation with all municipalities, how do we share those costs against that, and do we reduce that overall fee because it's too much, or if he all of a sudden starts getting busy, then we have to have that conversation anyway, I guess, as well.
Michael, is the $2,500 fee the same for all municipalities regardless of
Regardless
size?
of size, yeah.
Oh.
So we have talked about per capita before.
Yeah.
I mean, I ran some basic numbers for this budget cycle as well, but we just haven't got to that point yet of figuring out whether or not that is gonna make it worthwhile for municipalities. And that could be a route that we go, but just, again, we only have a limited amount of activity and basis.
Yeah.
So for some of them to pay per capita, it may not make sense for them based on the volume of what the actual activity is. And I guess, again, that's part of that discussion eventually, having to go back to participating municipalities and have those conversations.
Well, in theory, the per capita, as the per capita increases, the number of calls increases, which means the number, the bills that go out will increase.
Right.
That's why we stayed with the 2,500.
That was our thought process.
How many calls does he get? I think it just back to the
It varies,
RTC.
but yeah, well, it depends. I mean, he gets some direct calls too. Some of you obviously in your municipality for calls as well, but I would say probably average weekly. I mean, right now, it's probably been 2 calls, probably. Yeah.
These are like stray dogs.
Stray dogs, could be, lost, injured animals, could be a variety of things. And then he has a lot of calls on non-domestic wildlife and all those that you really can't do much about at all, so. But the ones that he actually responds to, a lot of them are lost dogs, found dogs, dogs living along the road, injured animals, which is another one that adds up.
You had a bobcat casting the other day.
That one's fun.
Where's the starting point for the mileage?
So it varies depending upon where home base considered, but essentially, you have, I think there was 2 home bases. One was here, leaving this office from here. And then the other variation to that is if he's out on a call in another municipality, then the municipality obviously went out for that call, was getting charged for the mileage it took to get there, but then they're not, the new municipality is picking up from where that left off to wherever he has to go to respond, I guess. And that's written into our agreements and stuff that we have, but it basically is a variation of the home base depending upon the call and where he's at the moment.
But that, yeah, that's made clear. So just.
It's built into the agreements, yeah.
Yep.
And we have an agreement, and then we also have an basically a memorandum anyway, that spells out how all the rest of this works, so. And they have to sign both if they want to participate, obviously.
Okay. And the hours work the same way, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically spelled, yeah.
Do you know offhand what the hourly rate is?
So he's $25.75 this year, so he was basically started out when we started the program at 25. Last year, we had 3% cost of living allowance, so get up to the 25.75, and this year is based on, again, the 3.2, is we just plug in what the commissioners had provided us for, so.
What's the enforcement look like? How many tickets does he do and court cases?
I mean, he has had to do a few court cases. Some towns are a little bit more, litigious, so that requires him to respond to courts, but he's had probably a half a dozen probably cases that have gone beyond just warnings. And I know he's been at least in 3 court cases where he's actually had to provide testimony and been a witness or whatever, so. I mean, it does happen. And once it happens, I mean, word gets around and that helps.
So he just issues the summonses, dangerous
Yeah.
dogs
Oh,
and
yeah.
stuff?
Yeah. I mean, he does do, and some municipalities have exerted their preference, so some prefer not to just come out of the gate, and then others maybe are waver a little bit more on that. But obviously, he does the progression. So I mean, and if it's something that's egregious and serious, then obviously he follows the statute of what he's obligated to have to do, so.
Where are the animals kept, if he has to catch them?
So the,
Small animal
small
clinic.
animal clinic, there we go, yes, where they get taken to.
Those costs get billed directly to the town?
Well, it depends on the circumstances, but in most cases, the towns have the agreements with those facilities or shelters in place.
Yeah.
So we're technically not in that, we just take them to wherever the municipalities tell us they're designated
What is this
shelters.
person doing when they're not, when they're not doing the animal control?
So basically, they have their own business, they own their own business, they have other odd jobs that they work on, so they do some construction or work and other stuff, so they have other ways to supplement it, so obviously it's not their primary income.
It's still part-time.
Yeah, I mean, if it was, we wouldn't be able to provide it most likely. And whoever, once he leaves, I mean, whoever takes over is probably gonna be the same thing. It's somebody that either is financially independent and wealthy maybe, or has the ability to supplement that in other ways so that they don't rely on this solely. So.
Any other discussion? Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Move the second. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Expenditure line remarkably, it's the same amount, $39,497.
It's easy.
On a motion,
So move.
moved in second in discussion. Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. That concludes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. for tonight. Motion to adjourn to the ninth,
To the 16th.
motion to adjourn to the 16th.
So moved.
And just to remind everyone, I will be zooming in for that meeting.
All in favor? Opposed? We are adjourned.
There's cider and cookies.
Thank you so much.
You know how to, Monica, do you know how to get to the Zoom link? So it's on the county website.
I think the whole thing. I did, you like, you get all this stuff.
Good, how are you?
Oh,